The top 10 most expensive Pawn Star items. On July 19, 2009, the History Channel premiered one of the strangest reality series the world has ever seen. A series that was to follow 3 generations of Harrisons through assessing and uncovering the true worth of historical items going in and out of gold and silver pawn shops in Las Vegas. Over the years, the show has seen countless rare and expensive items. Now the time has come to reveal the top 10 most expensive Pawn Star items that have found their way to the Pawn Stars. Number 10. 4 1-kilo gold bars. At number 10 on our list are these shiny, heavy metals that look like they were taken straight out of an Egyptian pharaoh's pyramid. The bars were so rare and beautiful that the Harrisons could not help but purchase them. Eventually, the Harrisons were able to flip the gold bars for $128,000. Number 9. Ides of March Roman coin. Items like coins and wine have one similar quality: they get finer and more expensive with time. This fact holds true for the Ides of March, a 2,000-year-old Roman coin brought to the Pawn Stars by a collector who had bought it from another collector way back in the 80s. Rick needed to be sure that the coin was truly authentic, so he brought in a coin expert. This coin expert confirmed the authenticity, and thus the negotiations began. The collector named John wanted $150,000 for the coin. However, Rick was not having it at all. Rick proposed a counteroffer, but John was unwilling to drop below $140,000. At the end of it all, they couldn't agree on a price, and the coin ended up being too expensive for the Pawn Stars to buy. Number 8. Mary Ford's 1961 Gibson SG Les Paul guitar. Time and time again, guitars have their way of ending up in the pawn shop. This was the case with this 1961 Gibson SG Les Paul guitar. The owner came in with a retro guitar and casually asked Rick, "My Aunt Mary Ford used to play this guitar with her husband, Les Paul." Turns out they were holding a Gibson SG Les Paul guitar made by Les Paul, the one who created it, and the actual guitar, which was played by his wife. An expert was called in to confirm the true value of the guitar. While it was evaluated around $150,000, the owner was reasonable enough to not want to sell the vintage musical artifact for too much. A deal to sell the guitar for $90,000 was agreed upon and sealed. Rick was happy, and the seller walked away from this one happy as well. Number 7. Where the Wild Things Are original artwork. It is only logical that rare items should be that expensive. Even more logical for one-of-a-kind items to drain your bank account faster than a plumber's clog. On Season 15, Episode 15 of Pawn Stars, which was aired in the first month of the new year, 2018, Rick is approached by a dealer who had the original artwork for the highly celebrated children's book, Where the Wild Things Are. The book was written by Maurice Sendak. The dealer wanted a whopping sum of $350,000 for the original drawings. While Rick wanted this extremely unique, one-of-a-kind piece of art, he thought that the drawing was just too expensive. Rick picked up his bargaining club and asked if the seller was willing to slash $100,000 off the price. The dealer was happy to oblige, and the deal was sealed. Rick got the original art for $250,000. Yeah, well done, Rick. Another worthy item in the bag. Number 6. JFK Cigar Humidor. You don't run into an ex-president's cigar humidor with a few unsmoked cigars every day, not every month, and definitely not every year. Hence, when this item came in, Rick knew for sure that the Pawn Stars were onto something quite remarkable and expensive. But this item was a little tricky. How do you ascertain the true value? It would take quite some effort and time to discover the true value of such rarity. While the researcher dusted off the humidor in a bid to determine the true worth, Rick had a solid idea of how much he was willing to pay for the humidor. Eventually, a deal for about $60,000 was sealed. Funny enough, Sotheby's managed to get another JFK cigar and sold it at the auction for $575,000. Number 5. Jimi Hendrix 1963 Fender Stratocaster guitar. Once again, guitars work their charm, and this Jimi Hendrix 1963 Fender Stratocaster strolled down to the Pawn Stars in all its electric majesty. Didn't take much research to recognize this one. It was clearly Jimi Hendrix's guitar. The serial number was documented and matched. You can only imagine how wowed the owner was when he discovered that he had been walking around with a Jimi Hendrix played guitar all along. Sure, he knew the 1963 guitar was valuable, but he definitely wasn't prepared to hear that the guitar was valued at close to $1 million. Rick, as usual, tried to get the best offer on the guitar. He tried to offer the owner half the true value, but the owner didn't budge. Rick then made another offer of $600,000. Once again, the owner refused. Apparently, he considered it a victory to walk away with Jimi Hendrix's 1963 Fender Stratocaster guitar rather than sell it for what would have been only 60% of its true value. Number 4. The Beatles' original contract. The world without the Beatles musical group would have meant losing out on the classic, timeless beauty of their evergreen music. It would have meant that over 600 million albums produced by the band would not have been sold, and the world would have needed to find another music group to fill in what would have been their spot among the top 3 bands in the world. But the Beatles had signed a contract in 1962 and have left their imprint on the world forever. It is expected that when someone walks in with the contract that marked the beginning of one of the most beautiful unions in the world, it's going to be damn expensive. The contract, which had George Harrison, John Lennon, Paul McCartney, Ringo Starr, and the manager Brian Epstein's signatures, asking price was for $1 million. No counteroffer was to be considered. It was either $1 million or nothing. The Pawn Stars decided that $1 million was just too much and let the offer slide through the door. Number 3. Robosaurus. Born by Doug Malowicki in 1989, 40 foot tall at birth, christened Tyrannosaurus Rex, spits fire and crushes vehicles for hobbies. Almost had its own NBC series at age 4, and the 3rd most valuable personality on our list. Nope, it's not a dragon. I'm talking about none other than the legendary robot, Robosaurus. Doug wanted $5 million for this brilliant tapestry of science and art. Careful not to insult or offend the genius of its creator, Rick decided it was best to let the young Robosaurus go. Number 2. O.J. Simpson's white Ford Bronco. Remember that white Ford Bronco O.J. Simpson was cruising with the day the LAPD was going to bust him and turn it into a low-speed chase? Yes, this power engine comes in as our 2nd most expensive item ever bought on the Pawn Stars. In case you haven't seen the chase before or heard the story behind this car's popularity, you might want to sit down for this one. The LAPD was ready as they came for Simpson. The legendary O.J. Simpson was sitting in the back while Al Cowlings sat behind the wheel of the white Ford Bronco. O.J. put the pieces together as fast as a deer in headlights. He was being hunted down and he knew it. Al floored the pedal and zoomed onto the highway. This is the point where you pause and see for yourself the chase that's been viewed by more than 130 million people. It was one sick chase. Anyway, this same Snow White car was brought to Rick to be sold. However, the owner wanted nothing less than $1.25 million. Could Rick purchase this iconic car? Unfortunately, he couldn't. Number 1. George Washington's 3-piece colonial suit. Get your hammers, because we're about to break the bank on this one. Talk about the biggest of them all, and what better episode to have this piece than the 500th episode. In celebration of this grand occasion, Rick heads out looking for the big hot ticket item at the time. His search leads him straight to Brian, a private dealer who was looking to get some presidential memorabilia off his hands. He unveils it, and guess what? It turns out to be a 3-piece suit worn by George Washington back in the 1750s. Rick had to pick his jaw up off the ground, obviously wowed. A piece historically should cost an arm and a foot, maybe more. Brian himself had bought it at an auction, and it's no surprise that despite a part of Brian wanting to let go of the piece, part of him still wanted to hold on to it. Intuitively, Brian asked for $3 million. No one knew to bring a bank along, so he dropped it down to $2.5 million. Sadly, no deal ensued, and Rick had to walk away with his hands in his pockets and missed out on what would have been by far the show's most expensive item in history. Have we seen the biggest there will ever be? Apparently no. 12 years down the road, and there's still so much to discover. How rare would these items be? How insanely expensive? Will there be any items that beat the items on our current list? And there you have it, the most expensive pawn items. Do you think there are even more that we missed out on? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Don't forget to like and share this video too, and also hit the subscribe button if you haven't done so yet.